Vanessa Whitmore thought humiliating the quiet girl at the charity gala would make her look powerful in front of the city's elite. But hidden inside the black envelope hanging from the girl's hand was something that would leave the entire ballroom speechless before the night was over. Rain shimmered against the towering glass windows of the Ashford Grand Hotel as luxury SUVs lined the entrance beneath golden lights and marble columns. Men in tailored tuxedos stepped out beside women wrapped in designer gowns, diamonds sparkling beneath crystal chandeliers visible through the lobby doors. A violin quartet played softly somewhere inside the ballroom, while photographers snapped pictures near the red carpet. It was the kind of event where old money greeted old money with polished smiles and quiet judgment. Then Claire Bennett stepped out of a yellow cab wearing a simple beige coat that looked at least 5 years old. Her blonde hair was tied back neatly, and the low heels she wore had clearly seen better days. Several guests glanced at her for less than a second before dismissing her entirely. She looked nothing like the women walking beneath the velvet ropes. But what nobody noticed was the matte black envelope tucked carefully beneath her arm, sealed with a silver emblem partially hidden by her fingers. Claire paused near the entrance as cold wind brushed against her coat. She quietly checked the address on her phone one more time before walking toward the registration desk inside the lobby. The marble floor reflected the chandelier light above her, and almost immediately she felt the stares. Not curious stares, judgmental ones. The kind that measured a person's worth in less than 3 seconds. Behind the welcome table stood Vanessa Whitmore, one of the city's most recognizable socialites and a senior board member of the Whitmore Children's Foundation. Her silver gown shimmered beneath the lights as she greeted wealthy donors with air kisses and polished laughter. But the moment her eyes landed on Claire, her smile faded almost instantly. Vanessa leaned slightly toward another woman beside her and whispered something that caused both of them to laugh quietly. Claire continued walking calmly toward the desk. "Good evening," she said politely. "I'm here for the gala." Vanessa looked Claire up and down slowly, her eyes lingering on the worn coat, then the old leather purse hanging from Claire's shoulder. "Oh," Vanessa replied with a smile that felt colder than the rain outside. "The volunteer check-in is through the service hallway around the back." A few nearby guests smirked into their champagne glasses. Claire blinked once. "I'm not a volunteer," she answered softly. "I was invited." Vanessa raised an eyebrow as if the statement itself were amusing. "Sweetheart," she said, lowering her voice just enough to sound condescending instead of openly cruel. "This event is invitation only." Claire nodded gently and adjusted the black envelope in her hands. "I understand." Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly when she noticed the envelope. For a brief second, curiosity crossed her face before arrogance returned just as quickly. "Are you delivering paperwork for someone?" she asked. "You can leave it with staff." Claire hesitated. "I'd prefer to hand it over personally." That answer earned another quiet laugh from the women standing nearby. One man in a tuxedo glanced at Claire's shoes before turning away with visible disinterest. The violin music drifted softly through the ballroom doors while waiters carried trays of champagne past them, pretending not to notice the growing tension near the entrance. Claire remained calm, but her fingers tightened slightly around the black envelope. She had dealt with this kind of treatment before. People who saw simple clothes and immediately assumed weakness. People who mistook kindness for insignificance. Vanessa folded her arms slowly. "Listen," she said, now loud enough for others nearby to hear. "These galas are attended by governors, investors, and major donors. We can't just let random people wander inside because they claim they belong here." The surrounding conversations began to quiet down. Several guests turned toward Claire openly now. And somewhere beneath the chandelier light reflecting across the marble lobby floor, the first crack in Vanessa Whitmore's perfect evening had already begun. The quiet conversations around the lobby slowly shifted into whispers as Vanessa Whitmore kept her attention fixed on Claire Bennett like she was an inconvenience standing in the middle of a luxury showroom. Crystal light shimmered across the marble walls while servers passed silver trays filled with champagne flutes and tiny desserts decorated with edible gold leaf. Everything about the Ashford Grand Hotel radiated wealth, from the soft piano drifting through hidden speakers to the velvet ropes separating guests from the registration area. And standing beneath all that elegance was Claire in her modest beige coat, holding the black envelope close against her side, while strangers looked at her the way people looked at rainwater tracked onto expensive carpet. Vanessa tilted her head slightly and forced another smile that never reached her eyes. "Who invited you exactly?" she asked. Claire answered calmly. "I believe my name should already be on the list." Vanessa let out a soft laugh. "I am sure you believe that." A man beside her in a navy tuxedo glanced toward Claire's coat and muttered quietly to his wife. "Probably another fundraiser hopeful." The woman nodded sympathetically without even looking directly at Claire. That was the strange thing about rooms like this. People could dismiss someone completely without ever learning a single thing about them. Claire noticed every stare, every whisper, every judgment hidden beneath polished manners. But her expression never changed. She simply stood there quietly while the chandelier light reflected softly against the silver seal on the edge of the black envelope. Vanessa tapped one manicured finger against the registration desk. These events attract all kinds of people once they hear there are wealthy donors inside, she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. Security usually catches them before they reach the front entrance. A few people chuckled politely. Claire lowered her eyes briefly, not out of shame, but patience. She had spent most of her adult life watching powerful people mistake kindness for weakness. The older she became, the more she realized wealthy rooms often revealed the poorest manners. Vanessa turned the guest list tablet toward herself and pretended to scroll through names. "What did you say your name was again?" "Claire Bennett." Vanessa paused for half a second before continuing to scroll. "No," she said smoothly. "I do not see you anywhere." Claire's eyes moved briefly toward the screen. She noticed Vanessa had not actually typed anything at all. The realization settled quietly in her chest. Vanessa had already decided she did not belong before checking a single detail. The ballroom doors opened behind them, and warm light spilled across the lobby as another wave of elegantly dressed guests entered laughing together. A photographer quickly moved toward a famous real estate investor while flashes filled the hallway. Claire stepped slightly aside to avoid blocking anyone. Her movements were calm and graceful, almost strangely composed for someone being publicly embarrassed. Vanessa noticed it too. Most people in Claire's position would have become defensive by now. They would have raised their voices, argued, or stormed away in humiliation. But Claire simply observed the room carefully, her eyes steady and unreadable. That calmness irritated Vanessa more than anger would have. "Miss Bennett," Vanessa said with a colder tone now, "there are people inside tonight who donated millions of dollars to this foundation. This is not the kind of gala where someone can just walk in wearing." Her eyes drifted deliberately over Claire's coat and worn heels. "Whatever this is." The room near the registration desk grew quieter again. Even the nearby waiters slowed slightly, sensing tension building beneath the polished atmosphere. Claire looked down briefly at her coat sleeve before lifting her eyes again. "It was my mother's," she said softly. For a brief second, Vanessa looked almost uncomfortable, but only for a second. Then the superiority returned immediately. "That is very sentimental," she replied. "But sentiment does not replace protocol." Claire nodded once. "Of course." Vanessa folded her arms. "I think it would be best if you left before this becomes embarrassing." The irony of the statement hung silently beneath the chandelier light while Claire stood there with quiet dignity, still holding the black envelope that none of them had bothered to truly notice. Vanessa Whitmore's smile sharpened slightly the moment she realized Claire Bennett was not leaving. Around them, the luxury gala continued unfolding beneath warm chandelier light and soft violin music, but near the registration desk the atmosphere had shifted into something colder. Guests entering the ballroom slowed their steps just enough to watch without appearing obvious. Wealthy people had a talent for pretending they were not staring while staring anyway. A tall man in a black tuxedo approached Vanessa holding a crystal glass of champagne. "Everything all right here?" he asked quietly. Vanessa sighed dramatically before answering. "Just a small misunderstanding." Her eyes flicked toward Claire again. "Miss Bennett seems confused about the guest list." The man looked Claire over carefully, his attention pausing on her old coat and simple purse before his expression settled into polite disinterest. "Ah," he murmured. "One of those situations." Claire heard every word. She simply adjusted her grip on the black envelope and remained silent. Nearby, two younger women wearing designer gowns whispered behind raised champagne glasses. One of them glanced toward Claire's shoes and smirked softly. Another guest actually stepped around Claire as though she might somehow disrupt the polished perfection of the evening just by standing there. The quiet exclusion was almost worse than direct cruelty. Vanessa leaned one elbow against the marble registration counter. I really do not understand why some people insist on putting themselves in uncomfortable situations, she said. There are plenty of wonderful public charity events in the city. This one is more private. Claire lifted her eyes calmly. I was told to come personally. Vanessa gave a thin smile. By who exactly? Claire hesitated for a brief moment before answering. Someone expecting me. A soft laugh escaped from the man beside Vanessa. That sounds mysterious. Or imaginary. One of the younger women whispered under her breath, causing another ripple of quiet laughter. Claire did not react. Instead, her fingers lightly brushed the silver seal pressed into the corner of the black envelope. The movement was small, almost absent-minded, but Vanessa noticed it immediately. What is in there? She asked. Claire met her gaze. Something important. To you, perhaps. Vanessa's tone turned colder. But I can assure you nobody important inside that ballroom is waiting for paperwork from a woman arriving in a taxi, wearing a thrift store coat. The words hung heavily in the air. Even the nearby pianist inside the ballroom seemed distant now beneath the silence growing around the entrance. Claire slowly lowered her hand from the envelope and glanced past the registration desk toward the ballroom doors. Through the opening, she could see enormous floral arrangements, gold-trimmed tables, and the city's wealthiest donors mingling beneath hanging crystal lights. Her eyes moved carefully across the room like she was searching for someone specific. Vanessa followed her gaze and folded her arms tighter. You are not getting inside, she said flatly. At that exact moment, one of the hotel security guards approached the desk after noticing the tension. He was a middle-aged man with silver hair and a calm expression. Is there a problem here? He asked politely. Vanessa answered before Claire could speak. No problem. Miss Bennett was just leaving. Claire finally spoke again, her voice quiet and steady. Actually, may I ask what time the board presentation begins? The question immediately changed something in the air. Not dramatically, just enough to create a flicker of confusion across a few faces nearby. Vanessa blinked once. Excuse me. Claire looked toward the ballroom again. The presentation tonight. Has it already started? The security guard glanced briefly between them. One of the younger women frowned slightly now, uncertain. Vanessa recovered quickly and laughed softly. You really did your research before showing up here, did not you? Claire did not answer. Instead, she reached into her purse and calmly pulled out her phone. She looked down at the screen for only a moment before making a very short call. I am here, she said quietly. At the front entrance. Then she ended the call and slipped the phone away again. No explanation. No emotion. Just calm certainty. And for the first time that evening, Vanessa Whitmore felt the faintest trace of unease settle beneath her polished confidence. The silence after Claire Bennett ended the phone call lingered longer than anyone expected. Vanessa Whitmore felt it immediately, though she refused to show it on her face. Around them, guests continued drifting through the ballroom entrance beneath towering crystal chandeliers, but more and more eyes kept turning back toward the growing tension at the registration desk. Wealthy people loved entertainment as long as they were not the ones being embarrassed. Vanessa straightened her shoulders and forced a composed smile. Well, she said lightly, I think we have entertained this long enough. She turned toward the security guard. Please escort Miss Bennett out before this becomes disruptive. The older guard hesitated slightly. Unlike the others, he had noticed something unusual about Claire from the beginning. Not her clothes. Not the envelope. Her composure. People pretending to belong usually over-explain themselves. They became nervous or defensive. Claire had done neither. Still, Vanessa's authority inside the foundation carried weight. Ma'am, the guard said carefully to Claire, perhaps it would be best if we move this conversation outside for a moment. Nearby guests pretended not to listen while listening very closely. One woman whispered into another's ear behind a champagne glass. A younger donor quietly took out his phone as though expecting drama worth recording. Claire glanced briefly toward the ballroom doors again. The violin music had stopped now, replaced by soft applause somewhere deeper inside the gala. The board presentation had likely begun. Vanessa noticed the direction of Claire's gaze and smirked faintly. You really should not make this harder on yourself, she said. These events are designed for people who understand how this world works. Claire looked back at her calmly. And how does it work? Vanessa folded her arms. People are vetted before entering rooms like this. Reputation matters. Presentation matters. Her eyes moved deliberately over Claire's beige coat again. Standards matter. A few nearby guests nodded subtly in agreement. The cruelest judgments were often delivered with polite voices and expensive jewelry. Claire lowered her eyes for one brief second before speaking quietly. Interesting. Vanessa tilted her head. What is? Claire's fingers lightly touched the silver seal on the black envelope once more. How quickly people confuse appearance with value. The words were not loud. They were not angry. But something about the calm certainty behind them caused the nearby whispers to fade for a moment. Vanessa laughed softly, though it sounded tighter now. That sounds very philosophical, she replied. But philosophy does not put names on guest lists. Then, with deliberate cruelty hidden beneath elegance, Vanessa reached toward the black envelope. Let me save us all some time, she said. I can leave your donation request with accounting. Claire's hand moved slightly back before Vanessa could touch it. The motion was small but unmistakably firm. The room grew quieter again. Even the security guard shifted uncomfortably now. Claire lifted her eyes slowly. I would not do that if I were you. Vanessa froze for half a second, not because of the words themselves, but because of how Claire said them. Calm, certain, almost protective. Then pride pushed the feeling away. You are in no position to tell me what to do, Vanessa replied sharply. One of the younger women nearby gave an awkward little laugh, though it sounded uncertain now instead of amused. Claire said nothing more. She simply stood there holding the envelope while the chandelier light reflected softly across its silver seal. Vanessa suddenly became aware that several guests were watching her very closely now, waiting to see what she would do next. And Vanessa Whitmore had built her entire reputation around never appearing weak in public. That is enough, she announced coldly. Miss Bennett, you are not authorized to attend this gala, and I am formally asking you to leave the premises. The words echoed harder than she intended. A hush fell over the nearby lobby. Claire remained perfectly still. Then she asked one quiet question that instantly unsettled the room again. Before I leave, she said softly, are you absolutely certain you want everyone here to witness this decision? Claire Bennett's question settled over the lobby like cold air slipping beneath a locked door. For the first time that evening, nobody laughed. The chandelier light shimmered across crystal glasses and polished marble, while the wealthy guests standing nearby exchanged uncertain glances. Vanessa Whitmore kept her posture straight, but a small crack had begun forming beneath her confidence. She could feel it. The older security guard noticed it too. Claire stood there quietly holding the black envelope against her coat, as though none of this chaos truly belonged to her. Vanessa forced a short laugh. Witness what exactly? She asked. Claire met her eyes calmly. A mistake. The answer was soft, almost gentle, but something about it caused the silence around them to deepen again. One of the younger women near the registration desk lowered her champagne glass slightly. Even the man in the navy tuxedo no longer looked amused. Vanessa lifted her chin. I think we are done here. She turned toward the security guard again. Please escort Miss Bennett outside immediately. But before the guard could respond, another voice interrupted from behind the registration desk. Wait. A young hotel coordinator named Ethan stepped closer while staring down at the computer screen beside Vanessa. He looked nervous already, like someone who realized too late he should have stayed quiet. I think, he hesitated. I think there may actually be a Bennett listed in the executive registry. Vanessa turned sharply. That is impossible. Ethan swallowed hard and adjusted his glasses. I did not check the executive file earlier because those guests are usually pre-cleared through private arrival. Vanessa's expression tightened instantly. Around them, the nearby whispers grew louder again. Claire remained completely still. Ethan clicked through several screens quickly while the glow from the monitor reflected across his face. Then his eyes widened slightly. There is a Claire Bennett listed here, he said quietly. Vanessa stepped closer. Show me. Ethan hesitated before turning the screen slightly toward her. Vanessa's confident expression flickered for only a second, but it was enough. Claire noticed it immediately. So did the older security guard. Vanessa recovered fast. That does not prove anything, she said sharply. People use fake names all the time to get access to these events. Ethan looked uncertain now. Maybe, but this file has authorization clearance attached to it. The younger women nearby exchanged glances again. One of them whispered, "Authorization for what?" Ethan scrolled further and froze. "Oh." Vanessa's voice became colder. "What now?" Ethan looked up slowly. "There is a note attached to the profile. Read it." He hesitated again before speaking carefully. "Arrival expected before board presentation. Direct access requested by Chairman Holloway himself." The room went completely silent. Somewhere inside the ballroom, soft applause echoed through the open doors before fading away again. Vanessa stared at the screen without blinking. Chairman Holloway was not just another donor. He was the founder of the entire foundation and one of the most powerful men in the state. Vanessa suddenly became aware of how many people were now watching her. Claire finally spoke again, her voice calm as ever. "I told you someone was expecting me." Vanessa looked away from the screen and forced a tight smile. If there has been some misunderstanding, it can be corrected privately. But the confidence was fading now. The words sounded thinner, more careful. Ethan glanced nervously toward Claire's black envelope. From this angle, part of the silver emblem was finally visible beneath the chandelier light. His eyes widened again. "Wait," he murmured softly. "That seal?" Vanessa turned toward him impatiently. "What about it?" Ethan looked between Claire and the envelope before lowering his voice. "I saw that logo during staff briefing this afternoon." He swallowed hard. "It belongs to the Bennett Family Trust." The reaction around them was immediate. Not loud. Worse. Quiet. Wealthy guests who had spent the last 20 minutes dismissing Claire now stared at her differently. Curious. Uneasy. Calculating. Vanessa's smile almost disappeared completely. Because everyone in that lobby knew exactly what the Bennett Family Trust was. It funded hospitals, universities, and half the charitable programs connected to the gala itself. And standing beneath the chandelier light in an old beige coat was apparently someone connected to all of it. The atmosphere inside the Ashford Grand Hotel had changed completely now. Only minutes earlier, Claire Bennett had been invisible to the wealthy crowd gathered beneath the crystal chandeliers. Now every whisper in the lobby carried her last name. Guests who once looked through her suddenly could not stop watching her. Vanessa Whitmore felt it slipping away from her little by little. Control. Authority. Certainty. And she hated the feeling. The silver-haired security guard stood quietly beside the registration desk, no longer trying to escort Claire anywhere. Ethan remained frozen behind the computer monitor, still staring at the executive registry like he wished he could erase what he had just discovered. Vanessa forced another polished smile, but it no longer looked effortless. "This is getting very dramatic over a simple clerical issue," she said lightly. "The Bennett Family Trust funds dozens of events. That does not mean every Bennett who walks through the door belongs in the ballroom." Claire listened without interruption. Her expression remained calm, almost thoughtful, while the chandelier light reflected softly across the black envelope in her hands. Vanessa stepped closer to the registration desk and lowered her voice just enough to sound composed. "Honestly, this is exactly why discretion matters at elite events. People hear a famous name and suddenly expect special treatment." One of the younger women beside her nodded quickly, eager to support her again now that the room felt uncertain. "Exactly," she added. "Anyone can claim connections." Claire finally looked toward Ethan. "Would you mind checking the secondary authorization file?" she asked quietly. Ethan blinked. "There is a secondary file?" Claire gave a small nod. "Chairman Holloway requested one after 4 o'clock this afternoon." Vanessa's jaw tightened almost invisibly. "There is no need for this," she interrupted sharply. "Miss Bennett, if you actually had legitimate business here, you would not have arrived looking like." Her eyes drifted once more toward Claire's coat and worn heels before she finished the sentence. "This." The cruelty landed harder now because nobody laughed this time. The lobby had gone too quiet. Claire lowered her gaze briefly, then slowly placed the black envelope on top of the marble registration desk. Every nearby, I followed the movement instantly. The silver seal caught the chandelier light perfectly now. Ethan stared at it openly. The older security guard leaned slightly closer. Even Vanessa looked at the emblem with growing unease. Claire carefully opened the envelope and removed a single black card with silver lettering engraved across the front. The room seemed to stop breathing for one suspended moment. Claire slid the card calmly across the marble toward Ethan. "Please verify the access level," she said softly. Ethan picked up the card with visibly trembling fingers. The moment he read the engraving, all color drained from his face. "Oh my God," he whispered. Vanessa frowned immediately. "What is it?" Ethan looked up slowly. "This is not a guest authorization." His voice had become almost painfully quiet now. "It is board chair clearance." A ripple of stunned silence spread through the lobby. Claire stood perfectly still while the wealthy crowd around her processed the words. Board chair clearance was not something handed out to donors or celebrity guests. It represented authority over the entire foundation itself. Vanessa laughed suddenly, but the sound came out strained. "That is impossible." Ethan swallowed hard and turned the card toward her. Engraved beneath the silver emblem was a name written in elegant lettering. Claire Bennett, Executive Successor Authorization. Vanessa stared at the card without moving. Then, desperately searching for control again, she made the worst mistake of the evening. "I do not care what card she has," she snapped loudly. No serious executive representing a billion-dollar trust arrives at a luxury gala in a coat from a thrift store carrying paperwork by hand. This woman is obviously performing some kind of stunt. The entire lobby went silent. Not polite silence. Not uncertain silence. The kind of silence that arrives right before everything changes. Claire slowly lifted her eyes toward Vanessa, calm as ever. Then she spoke one quiet sentence that made several people in the room visibly tense. "Would you like me to call Chairman Holloway personally and let him hear what you just said?" The silence after Claire Bennett spoke felt almost unreal beneath the glowing chandeliers of the Ashford Grand Hotel. Nobody moved. Nobody even lifted a champagne glass. Vanessa Whitmore stood frozen beside the marble registration desk, her face still holding traces of forced confidence even as uncertainty spread through the lobby like a crack running through glass. Ethan remained motionless behind the computer monitor, still clutching the black authorization card carefully in both hands. The older security guard looked toward Claire with an entirely different expression now. Not suspicion, respect. Then suddenly, the ballroom doors opened wide. Several heads turned immediately as a distinguished older man in a charcoal tuxedo stepped into the lobby, surrounded by Foundation executives. Chairman Arthur Holloway rarely entered a room unnoticed. At 72 years old, he carried the quiet authority of someone who no longer needed to impress anyone. Conversations throughout the lobby stopped the instant people recognized him. But what happened next stopped them even more. Chairman Holloway looked directly past the wealthy guests, past Vanessa, past the registration desk, and walked straight toward Claire Bennett. Vanessa's face lost color immediately. Claire remained calm as ever, standing quietly with her mother's beige coat folded neatly around her shoulders while the chairman approached her with visible relief. "Claire," he said warmly, extending both hands toward her. "Thank goodness you made it." The room went completely silent. Not a whisper remained. Holloway noticed the tension almost immediately. His eyes moved slowly between Claire, the security guard, Ethan, and finally Vanessa Whitmore. The atmosphere shifted the moment his expression changed. "Is there a problem here?" he asked quietly. Nobody answered at first. Vanessa opened her mouth slightly, but no words came out. Ethan swallowed hard and carefully handed the black authorization card back to Claire like it belonged in a museum. Chairman Holloway looked toward Vanessa again. "Miss Whitmore." She forced a tight smile. "There seems to have been confusion regarding guest verification." Holloway frowned slightly. "Guest verification?" He looked back toward Claire with visible confusion now. "Claire is not a guest." Those 6 words landed harder than anything else that evening. Several people visibly straightened where they stood. Vanessa blinked rapidly. Holloway continued calmly. "Claire Bennett is the sole successor appointed to oversee the Bennett Family Trust and its charitable division beginning tonight." The lobby became so quiet that the soft fountain near the ballroom entrance could suddenly be heard again. Claire stood peacefully while the truth settled across every face around her. Holloway turned slightly toward the surrounding guests. "As of 7 o'clock this evening, Miss Bennett officially becomes the majority funding authority for every foundation partnership represented at this gala." A woman near the velvet ropes quietly gasped into her hand. The younger women who had laughed earlier stared at Claire with wide eyes now. The man in the navy tuxedo slowly lowered his champagne glass without realizing it. Vanessa looked like the floor beneath her had disappeared. Holloway continued speaking, his voice steady and respectful. The Bennett Family Trust contributes nearly 60% of this foundation's annual funding. Claire's approval is required for every major board appointment, including executive renewals beginning tomorrow morning. The meaning behind those words spread instantly through the room. Several board members standing near the ballroom doors glanced toward Vanessa with sudden discomfort, because Vanessa Whitmore's board renewal was scheduled for review the very next day. Claire finally spoke, her voice calm and gentle despite the stunned silence surrounding her. "I did not come here to embarrass anyone." She looked briefly toward Vanessa before continuing. "I only came to attend the presentation my father helped build before he passed away." Her words carried no arrogance, no revenge, only quiet honesty. Chairman Holloway's expression softened slightly. "Your father would have been very proud of you tonight," he said. Claire lowered her eyes briefly at the mention of her father. Then, slowly, she picked up the black envelope from the registration desk and handed it to Holloway. "These are the revised scholarship approvals," she explained softly. "I wanted to deliver them personally." Holloway accepted the envelope carefully. Increasing the medical scholarship fund by $12 million was extraordinarily generous. Another stunned silence swept across the lobby. $12 million. The same woman who had been treated like she did not belong in the building had quietly arrived, carrying enough funding to change thousands of lives. Vanessa Whitmore could no longer even maintain eye contact, because standing beneath the chandelier light in an old beige coat was not an unwanted outsider at all. She was the most powerful person in the entire room. For several long seconds after Chairman Holloway revealed the truth, nobody in the Ashford Grand Hotel lobby seemed to know how to react. The chandeliers still glowed overhead. Waiters still carried silver trays through the ballroom entrance. Somewhere deeper inside the gala, soft music continued playing as if the entire evening had not just changed forever. But near the marble registration desk, the atmosphere had become painfully still. Vanessa Whitmore stood frozen beside the velvet ropes, her polished confidence completely gone now. She looked at Claire Bennett differently for the first time that night. Not as an outsider, not as a woman in an old coat, but as someone whose quiet presence carried more influence than everyone else in the room combined. Around them, wealthy guests who had laughed earlier now avoided eye contact altogether. The younger women who had whispered about Claire's shoes suddenly found the marble floor very interesting. Even the man in the navy tuxedo stepped subtly backward like he wanted distance from the humiliation unfolding beside him. Chairman Holloway's expression remained calm, but disappointment had settled clearly across his face as he looked toward Vanessa. "Miss Whitmore," he said quietly, "I sincerely hope this foundation has not forgotten the values it was created to represent." Vanessa swallowed hard. "Chairman Holloway, I did not realize," Holloway interrupted gently. "That is precisely the problem." The words landed softly, but they carried enough weight to silence the entire lobby again. Vanessa lowered her eyes for the first time all evening. Her voice became smaller now, stripped of the superiority she had worn like jewelry only minutes earlier. "Miss Bennett," she said carefully, "I owe you an apology." Claire looked at her calmly. Vanessa hesitated before continuing. "I judged you unfairly tonight." The admission clearly cost her pride. "I made assumptions based on your appearance, and I was wrong." Several guests nearby listened closely now, their expressions uneasy, because the truth was uncomfortable. Most of them had made the exact same assumptions. Claire remained silent for a moment before speaking softly. "You were not the only one." No anger, no cruelty. Somehow that made the moment even heavier. Vanessa glanced briefly toward Claire's coat again, but this time there was no mockery in her eyes, only embarrassment. "I thought." She stopped herself, struggling to finish the sentence. Claire helped her gently. "You thought someone important would look important." Vanessa looked away immediately. The older security guard quietly lowered his head as if the sentence applied to everyone standing there. Claire carefully took back the black authorization card from the registration desk and slipped it into the envelope again. "My father used to wear this coat when he visited hospitals funded by the foundation," she explained softly while touching the sleeve. "He believed people listened more honestly when they were not distracted by wealth." Chairman Holloway smiled faintly at that. "That sounds exactly like Robert Bennett." Claire nodded once. "He taught me something before he passed away." Her eyes slowly moved across the silent crowd surrounding them. The easiest way to reveal someone's character is to give them a chance to look down on another person. The room went completely still again. Several people visibly shifted uncomfortably beneath the chandelier light. One of the younger women quietly set her champagne glass down without taking another sip. The truth had settled into the room now, and there was no escaping it. Claire could have humiliated Vanessa publicly if she wanted to. She could have demanded consequences immediately. She had the authority to do far worse. But instead, she simply adjusted the envelope in her hands and offered a small, graceful nod. "I did not come here to punish anyone," she said quietly. "I came here to help students who need scholarships." Chairman Holloway's expression softened with visible respect. Around them, attitudes had completely changed now. Guests who once dismissed Claire were suddenly greeting her politely. Board members stepped forward, introducing themselves with careful smiles. Ethan looked relieved that she had shown kindness after everything that happened. But Vanessa Whitmore remained standing silently near the registration desk, surrounded by the echoes of her own words. Because no designer gown, expensive jewelry, or social status could protect someone from the shame of realizing they had measured human worth by appearances alone. And that night, beneath the crystal chandeliers of the Ashford Grand Hotel, everyone in the lobby learned the same lesson at once. Dignity does not announce itself with wealth. Sometimes it arrives quietly in an old beige coat, while the entire room fails to recognize it. The ballroom of the Ashford Grand Hotel felt different after that. Not quieter exactly, but more careful. Conversations resumed beneath the crystal chandeliers and golden lights, yet every voice carried a strange restraint now, as though the entire room had suddenly remembered how easily appearances could lie. Claire Bennett stood near the front of the ballroom beside Chairman Holloway, while Foundation executives gathered around them with polite smiles and nervous respect. The same guests who had ignored her earlier now greeted her warmly, introducing themselves one after another as if they had known her for years. Claire answered each person with the same calm kindness she had shown from the moment she arrived. No arrogance, no triumph, just quiet dignity. At the far side of the ballroom, Vanessa Whitmore remained unusually silent. She watched as board members who once surrounded her now shifted their attention toward Claire instead. It was not cruelty that hurt them most. It was irrelevance. For the first time in years, Vanessa understood what it felt like to stand in a room full of powerful people and realize status alone could not command respect. Chairman Holloway eventually guided Claire toward the stage prepared for the evening presentation. Rows of wealthy donors and executives slowly took their seats, while soft piano music echoed through the ballroom. A large screen behind the stage displayed photographs of scholarship students, hospitals, and community programs funded through the foundation. Claire looked quietly at the images while holding the black envelope against her side. Her father's work, her family's legacy, the same legacy people nearly denied entry because it arrived wearing an old beige coat. Holloway stepped to the microphone first. "Tonight," he announced warmly, "the Bennett Family Trust begins a new chapter under the leadership of Claire Bennett." Applause filled the ballroom immediately, though many clapped with visible embarrassment lingering behind their smiles. Claire stepped forward calmly when Holloway invited her to speak. Hundreds of eyes followed her as she reached the podium. The ballroom became completely silent again. Claire looked across the room slowly before speaking. "My father believed charity was never about prestige," she said softly. "He believed the real purpose of success was helping people who would never be invited into rooms like this." Several guests lowered their eyes at those words. Claire continued gently. "Tonight reminded me how easy it is to misjudge someone based on clothing, appearance, or circumstance. But dignity does not depend on wealth. Kindness does not require status. And character is revealed most clearly in how we treat people who cannot offer us anything in return." No one moved. The silence felt almost sacred now. Claire then opened the black envelope one final time and removed a folder containing the revised scholarship approvals. She signed the final page carefully beneath the chandelier light, while cameras quietly captured the moment. $12 million in expanded scholarships. Thousands of future students whose lives would change because one quiet woman chose compassion over pride. After the applause faded, Claire stepped away from the podium and returned the signed folder to Chairman Holloway. Then, unexpectedly, she turned toward Ethan, the nervous young hotel coordinator who had been the first person willing to check the system honestly. "Thank you for treating the truth seriously," she told him gently. Ethan looked stunned. I was just doing my job. Claire smiled faintly. That matters more than most people realize. Even the older security guard received a grateful nod from her before she finally reached for her coat again. Across the ballroom, Vanessa Whitmore slowly approached her. There was no audience around them now. No performance left to maintain. Miss Bennett, Vanessa said quietly. I will remember this night for a very long time. Claire studied her for a brief moment before answering softly. Then let it change the way you see people. Vanessa nodded once, unable to say anything else. A few minutes later, Claire walked alone through the grand lobby toward the hotel entrance while the rain outside softened against the city lights. Guests moved aside quietly as she passed, not because she demanded attention, but because they finally understood who she truly was. At the revolving doors, Claire paused briefly and touched the sleeve of her mother's old beige coat one last time. Then she stepped into the rainy night carrying nothing but the black envelope in her hand while the chandelier light faded slowly behind her. And inside the Ashford Grand Hotel, nobody forgot the woman they almost turned away.